Honorable President of the National Assembly, Honorable President of the Senate, Honorable National Deputies and Senators, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my dear compatriots. It is always with great joy and pleasure that I find myself before you at this time of the year. In accordance with the relevant provision of our Constitution, which provides in its Article 77 that the President of the Republic shall deliver once a year a speech on the state of the nation before the National Assembly and the Senate gathered in Congress. I have therefore insisted today on the strict respect of this tradition, as in the previous 2 years, by presenting to you the results of various actions carried out during the year 2021, which is drawing to a close. I thus bring answers and clarifications to the numerous concerns of our people on the various vital questions that affect the progress and survival of our nation. But first of all, in order to honor the memory of our civilian and military compatriots fallen because of the activism of armed groups and the indiscriminate violence of the ADF terrorist group during this year, I ask you to kindly agree to observe a moment of recollection. Thank you. I remain firmly convinced that one of the biggest questions that is on our minds, the one that certainly each of us carries like a thorn under our skin, has to do with this climate of permanent and recurrent insecurity which is rampant in the east of our country. This poisonous climate has always threatened its territorial integrity and lent itself to various interpretations, given the unspeakable customs experienced by the populations of many regions in this area. I had therefore decreed in May of this year, in accordance with Article 85 of our Constitution, the state of siege in the provinces of North Kivu and Ituri, prey to the violence sown by the negative forces constituted in armed groups for more than a quarter of a century. The aim remains to mobilize all the multiforum means available to the Republic to definitively defeat this evil that is destroying all our development efforts. In my capacity as guarantor of territorial integrity, it is here the place to solemnly renew my constitutional commitment by reaffirming that I will spare no effort to restore peace and security in any corner of the Republic. I therefore call upon the collective conscience of each of us Congolese, and I call upon the surge in the patriotic sense by affirming that there will never be Congolese without the Congo of their dream. In spite of our differences of approach, and it is my ultimate and deep conviction, the integrity of the Congolese nation must remain the concern of all Congolese, as we have already shown on many occasions over the years. I take this opportunity to congratulate the two chambers of Parliament which, in their concern to see peace return to the eastern part of the Republic, have always authorized successive renewals of the state of siege, in accordance with the legal texts in force, which allowed our armed forces to carry out serenely the actions necessary for the restoration of peace in these two provinces, and to consolidate the achievements of the operations. Indeed, since the establishment of this state of siege, I have personally ensured that our valiant armed forces of defense and security have all the necessary means to carry out operations on the ground. I note with satisfaction that our armed forces have gradually succeeded in moving the lines, and to respond. They have succeeded in moving the lines, I said, and to retake several strongholds, once occupied by the enemy. Some gang leaders have been neutralized, and several elements of these negative forces surrendered. Certainly the enemy in his flight and his legendary nuisance commits massacres on the civilian population. But this will not alter my determination to bring peace to our country. I would like to honorable national deputies and senators to condemn this campaign of denigration and demobilization, led by a tiny minority of our compatriots. Playing at each blow of the pernicious role of smothering, as if to confirm that the insecurity which reigns in this part of our country reinforces them in their enterprises. I invite them to join the camp of the fatherland. 4. For it is only in unity and concord that we will succeed in defeating this enemy who has taken the habit of sowing desolation in our cities and our villages. It is the occasion for me to salute the rise in power of our army, and the bravery of our soldiers who, in spite of all these demobilizing tractations, continue under the flag to give the best of themselves. And this until the supreme sacrifice for the defense of the integrity and sovereignty of our country. Let us unite, dear compatriots, behind our defense and security forces, because the final victory belongs to the motherland, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, that we will never betray. I emphasize that, in order to restore social peace in these regions plagued by insecurity, I have initiated the implementation of the program in charge of disarmament, demobilization, community recovery and stabilization. PDDRCS, an acronym to encourage compatriots who are in armed groups to throw down their weapons and to reintegrate into community life away from the profession of arms. I take this opportunity to salute the support received from various partners in the implementation of this program, and I also take this opportunity to acknowledge the contribution of the United Nations, which through MONUSCO supports our country in this desire for pacification and stability in the eastern part of our national territory. But as peace goes hand in hand with justice, I have instructed the government of the Republic to implement restorative mechanisms, notably that of transitional justice, for the benefit of victims. In addition, some terrorist forces also operate in other neighboring countries, This is the case of the ADF, who especially scour the common border between Uganda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So in order to fight them more effectively, our two countries have recently agreed to mutualize their efforts in order to carry out joint operations against this common enemy. Our Parliament duly informed. I will ensure to limit to the time strictly necessary for these operations the presence of the Ugandan army on our soil. Honorable members of Parliament and senators, allow me to point out that the major cities of our country have unfortunately not been spared by cases of insecurity committed by delinquents of all kinds, commonly called kuluna, and road cutters, who have deliberately chosen to disturb the peace of peaceful citizens by terrorizing them, both with knives as well as with firearms. A bad culture that must absolutely be banished of our society. To annihilate all these plagues, and to guarantee the security of the people and their property throughout the country, I have instructed the government to take all appropriate measures against these marginal people. I am pleased with the first results obtained by the experience of the pilot center of Kinshasa. Once abandoned to themselves, today these young compatriots master several trades, including masonry, carpentry, agriculture, and breeding. I ask the government to intensify its efforts to reintegrate idle youth into society throughout the territory, for their better contributions to the development of the country. Honorable national deputies and senators, upon my accession to the supreme magistracy, I announced that the rule of law and independent justice, the fight against corruption and impunity, were the leitmotif of my action in its component of political governance. It is in this sense that the revitalization of certain structures must be placed. Indeed, I have made it a point of honor to improve the efficiency of the General Inspectorate of Finance, IGF, whose action was little perceptible until my arrival, as well as the creation of the Agency for the Prevention and Fight Against Corruption, ABLC in acronym, also responded to this imperative. Placed under my direct authority, the General Inspectorate of Finance contributes effectively to the effort to clean up public finances, to the great satisfaction of our people. Nevertheless, the IGF cannot replace the action of the judiciary, which alone has the constitutional mission of saying the law. I remain convinced that the establishment of the rule of law and the authority of the state requires a justice conscious of its role and its independence, and this should be our common perception. Unfortunately, in spite of some progress that I welcome, I cannot remain indifferent in my capacity of supreme magistrate to the cries of distress and desolation of the Congolese people, who, every day that passes, claim more guarantee of a good and healthy administration of justice. Today again, in the dock, our justice should however reassure everybody, rich or not, powerful as weak, by having for consideration only the protection of rights, in short, a justice which not only says the right, but assures that the good right has been said. I reaffirm my commitment to continuing courageous reforms in the justice sector, including those relating to the structures and the quality of their animators, according to the principle, the right man in the right place. I was saying, I reaffirm my commitment to continue the courageous reforms in the justice sector, including those related to the structures and the quality of their animators, according to the principle, the right man in the right place. I encourage the Superior Council of the Judiciary to make the disciplinary chambers work, so that sanction be the only reward for the bad magistrates who by their behavior tarnish the image of a whole institution, wanted in a lead body. In order to solve the recurrent problems of insufficient numbers of magistrates, the government is called with the assistance of the Superior Council of the Judiciary to finalize the recruitment process. The last one to date, unfortunately, goes back to more than a decade. In the particular case of the Constitutional Court, which is currently in great demand, solicited within the framework of the protection of the rights and freedoms of the citizens, which I welcome and encourage. The experience has however shown that during the treatment of electoral disputes, the 9 judges who compose it are often overwhelmed with regard to time constraints. I therefore encourage the President of this court to work with the government in order to set up the body of referendary advisors, a legal technical tool, which will prove to be a determining factor in the treatment of cases and in the perpetuation of jurisprudence. It is in the same sense that I intend to make operational in the very next few days the different organs and structures of the Court of Auditors, the highest public finance control authority, so that it can fully play its role of chief financial patroller, with the support of the General Inspection of Finances. I expect that these same performances be at the heart of the action of the Agency of Prevention and Fight Against Corruption, the National Financial Intelligence Unit, as well as other high-level control services, as a mechanism to fight against corruption, embezzlement of public funds, money laundering, fraud, and even financing of terrorism. Honorable national deputies and senators, the mobilization of the investments we need to create wealth and develop our country requires a good business climate. This implies that at all times we be not only attentive to the grievances of economic operators, but also and especially that we imagine mechanisms that can improve the conditions of doing business and ensure the follow-up. During this year, I reiterated to the government my will to take in charge with efficiency the problem of the business climate, through a new approach of monitoring and evaluation that has never been tried before in our system of governance, in order to reassure investors. To this end, I am pleased to announce the implementation of a tool which will now allow, in real time, myself, the Prime Minister, as well as to each of the members of the government concerned, to follow meticulously the pace of implementation of the reforms these assignments on the business climate. It is in fact a customized digital dashboard from the government's program. Also, I invite the Parliament to finalize the legal framework relating, on the one hand, the organization and functioning of the commercial courts, and on the other hand to the national provisions complementary to the law of OHADA. In addition, the rationalization of taxation remains the appropriate response to the hassles often denounced by economic operators. Innovative reforms are needed in this area to correct it. Honorable national deputies and senators, I would like to salute once again the determination, the firmness, and the fervor with which you had all tendencies accepted to answer favorably to my call of rallying in a sacred union of the nation. An exhilarating call, at the same time of heart of spirit, in order to consolidate principles and values around noble actions, able to respond positively to the numerous and anxious expectations of our people. The same expectations unfortunately not fulfilled for decades. Allow me to remind you that this enthusiasm and this new impetus have allowed us to quickly put in place new offices, both in the National Assembly and in the Senate, and to form the current government called to defend the interests of the population, which really allowed to facilitate the exchanges and to build real bridges of collaboration between the different institutions of the Republic. I remind you that this government of the Republic has, as its main mission, the restoration of peace and security, the revival of the national economy, to clean up the management of public finances, the fight against corruption in all its forms, the qualitative improvement of the living conditions of our populations, universal health coverage, the application of free education as prescribed in the Constitution, and the reinforcement of the authority of the state, and the rule of law. I also note that the implementation, under my leadership, of these different pillars is the basis of the progressive and qualitative improvement of the political, economic and social governance, which is already producing results that it is important to support. It is here for me the place to salute the perceptible cohesion around the nation's sacred union, in spite of the small quarrels of parochialism, that I consider moreover as eloquent manifestations of the very expression of democracy. Moreover, I would like to specify that, despite belonging to the majority or the opposition, each one of us must fully play his part in the love of the country, of our people, and in the respect of the institutions. In this spirit, I wish to express the deep respect that I feel for our people, for its fierce determination to keep always burning the flame of national unity, in spite of adversity and all the trials imposed on us by this march towards peace, democracy, unity, cohesion, the rule of law, and social progress. Honorable national deputies and senators, at the same time as I recognize the harmony in the relations between different institutions at national level. I must unfortunately mention that the year 2021 has been fundamentally characterized by the instability of the provincial assemblies and governments. In fact, conflicts between these provincial institutions have been exacerbated during this year, to the point of fundamentally mortgaging the development of the provinces concerned. It should be noted that 14 provinces out of 26 have had their governors dismissed by the provincial assemblies. As a result of these same conflicts, some presidents of provincial assemblies have also been removed from office. It is extremely important for each of these provincial actors to be truly aware that no development can take place in such a context of crisis. The next session of the Governors' Conference will be an opportunity to reflect on possible solutions to this thorny problem. Furthermore, I strongly urge you to consider the amendment of certain legal texts related to the management of provincial institutions. I invite once again provincial deputies and the governors to observe their prerogatives in the strict respect of the laws of the Republic, by refraining from any act that can block the good functioning of the provinces. In the meantime, the Senate, as an emanation of the provincial assemblies, is called upon to continue its role as mediator and advisor to their leaders, so that harmony reigns within our provinces. Honorable President of the National Assembly, Honorable President of the Senate, Honorable National Deputies and Senators, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my very dear compatriots, I consider it useful to draw everyone's attention to the preparations of the upcoming elections. Indeed, the electoral process with its stakes requires that we commit ourselves now for elections that we want to be credible, by removing the various obstacles, both legal and material, which constitute the burdens of it. My commitment to make the Democratic Republic of the Congo a truly democratic state cannot be realized without the organization of elections that are free, democratic, transparent, and within the constitutional deadlines. I therefore launch a solemn appeal to all our people to accompany democratically the Independent National Electoral Commission, and to get actively involved in the electoral process. I recall that this one has already begun with the designation of these new animators, after consultation with religious denominations, and validation by the National Assembly, in order to complete the composition of the CENI Bureau. I urge those political actors who are still dragging their feet to quickly designate their respective representatives within this board. I invite at the same time the government to mobilize and make available the necessary financial means to enable CENI to respect the deadlines for the organization of these elections, so that they are effectively held in 2023. To do this, it is also important that the Parliament proceeds diligently to the vote of the laws still pending for a successful conclusion of the next electoral cycle. Honorable National Deputies and Senators, As I mentioned at the beginning of my address, our country has always suffered from health crises that have occurred during this year. In fact, the COVID-19 pandemic has not spared the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Even if our country has a relatively low mortality rate, I urge you to continue to strictly observe the barrier measures, because the successive appearance of new variants shows that we have not finished with this pandemic. I call upon the vigilance of our border services to rigorously apply the measures enacted for this purpose. In the current state of knowledge, the vaccine remains the most effective way to avoid severe forms of the disease. In fact, the data collected to date show without a doubt that the gains in terms of protection of the vaccinated persons against the severe forms of the disease outweigh the adverse and often transient effects attributable to vaccines. I strongly recommend the population to get vaccinated to protect themselves. In addition to the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ebola virus disease epidemic, our country has been strongly affected by other health emergencies. This is notably the case of the meningitis epidemic in the province of Chopo, and of the monkeypox epidemic recently declared in Maniema. Our teams are working to put an end to it within the framework of an appropriate response. I take this opportunity to salute the competence of Congolese scientists, who have made our country shine, with, among others, the development of the Ebanga drug, duly certified at the international level, for its effectiveness in the treatment of the disease Ebola virus. Honorable National Deputies and Senators, all the emergencies and health disasters that we have experienced this year, and even long before, have taught us a great lesson. That of knowing that in order to better prevent and respond we must absolutely build a more solid and resilient health system for the benefit of all Congolese. This is why I have made universal health coverage a national cause in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In the coming days, the government will do everything possible to make this vision effective, which is also strongly desired by our people. To this end, I remind you that we already have a national strategy in this area, a steering and coordination framework, as well as all the instruments of facilitation for its deployment on the whole national territory. In addition, the government is preparing to pay the Health Solidarity Fund, the contribution for the care of the indigent, as well as the employer's share of the contribution of career agents of the state's public services. It is time that poverty and lack of financial resources no longer constitute barriers to access to quality health care and services. Honorable National Deputies and Senators, this year, our country has had the privilege of assuming the rotating presidency of the African Union. In my acceptance speech, I announced my intention to put the African Union at the service of the African people. This formulation seemed to me to be in conformity to the general theme retained for the year 2021, namely, art, culture and heritage. A lever for building the Africa we want. Arts and culture are indeed the expression of the creativity of our people. As this mandate draws to a close, I can say how proud I am to have contributed to putting the African Union at the service of the people. I have put at the center of my action issues related to albinism, gender equality, violations against women and girls, the fight against climate change, and the protection of local communities and indigenous peoples. It is in this context that we must situate the mobilization of African countries around the next international conference on the reconstitution of cultural property in the African Renaissance. The holding of the Kinshasa Conference on Gender Equality in Africa and the adoption of the Kinshasa Declaration on Gender Equality. The Kinshasa Conference on Positive Masculinity, and the adoption of the African Union Declaration to end violence against women and girls. And finally, the organization of the Pan-African Colloquium of Kinshasa, under the theme African Solidarity, for an Africa in favor of people with albinism. During this year 2021, I have also carried the voice of Africa at the international level, especially in the context of COVID-19, to claim the benefit of the continent, the best conditions to fight against the pandemic, and the revival of our national economies. To this end, at the Paris Summit on Financing African Economies in May 2021, I called for more financial resources for Africa, and for the continuation and strengthening of mechanisms put in place to relieve African countries that have fallen into debt situations due to the effects of the pandemic. At the G20 summit in Rome, on behalf of Africa, I called on participating countries to concretize their commitment to the preservation of the forests of the Congo Basin through substantial funding. In the health sector, I supported the campaign in favor of the operationalization of the African Drug Agency. And in the fight against COVID, I have supported Africa's ambition to produce vaccines on the continent. In addition, I have called for, within the framework of the reform of the United Nations Security Council, 4 seats for Africa, including 2 non-permanent and 2 permanent members. Always on the continental level, I was at the forefront of many initiatives to preserve peace. In particular, from the beginning of my mandate, have taken on the problem of the dispute that has opposed for several years Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan around the problem of the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. These efforts have created a dynamic of permanent dialogue. The holding of the first ministerial conference on this conflict in Kinshasa in April 2021 was a key moment in this dynamic. The chairmanship of the African Union was an opportunity for the Democratic Republic of the Congo to regain its place in international forums. Indeed, for decades, there had been no national policy to position its many experts in international organizations, which was incomprehensible. So I decided to change this state of affairs. And I am happy that during this year, a compatriot was elected President of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and another member of the Commission of International Law of the United Nations. In addition, a Congolese woman was appointed to the post of Director of Human Resources at the African Union Commission. Honorable President of the National Assembly, Honorable President of the Senate, Honorable National Deputies and Senators, Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my dearest compatriots. Since my arrival to power, I have made the return of the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the international scene one of my priorities. With a clear objective to open our country to the world and to break its diplomatic isolation. The reintegration of our country in the concert of nations has thus become a reality. In fact, the number of countries that have accredited their ambassadors to the Democratic Republic of the Congo continues to grow, with the recent registration of requests from Australia, Indonesia, and other countries with non-resident ambassadors anxious to see their embassies open in Kinshasa. On the regional level, our energies have been deployed to maintain a policy of good neighborliness with 9 neighbors. Thus, we have intensified contacts at the bilateral level with Burundi, Uganda, and Rwanda. To revitalize relations with our partners on the one hand, I have appointed 2 new ambassadors to Belgium, in France, in China, and in Côte d'Ivoire, and secondly, I have appointed us as permanent representative to the United Nations in New York and Geneva. Finally, I have asked the government to ensure the implementation of reforms within the national diplomatic apparatus, and to begin the process of providing adequate care for our diplomats and their families outside the country. Honorable national deputies and senators, during the year 2021, our international cooperation has made significant progress with our various partners in America, Asia, and Oceania. The repercussions of the revitalization of our diplomacy are no longer to be demonstrated, as shown by several projects, agreements and memorandums of understanding that our country has just concluded. Honorable national deputies and senators, from October 31st to November 12, 2021, the 26th Conference on Climate Change, COP26, was held in Glasgow. On this occasion, I have highly carried the ambition of the Democratic Republic of the Congo to assume its natural leadership as a country solution to the current climate challenge. I was saying that, on this occasion, I have highly carried the ambition of the Democratic Republic of the Congo to assume its natural leadership as a country solution to the current climate challenge. Because of the exceptional natural resources of which it abounds, I had to remind that with about 52% of the freshwater resources, representing 10% of the world's freshwater resources, in addition to its forests and its biodiversity, our country has resolutely registered, during these meetings, in a perspective of effective materialization of its agenda. The objective was not to praise once again the natural potential of our country but rather to put the course only towards actions with concrete impact on the lives of our populations. To this effect, I clearly indicated that it is imperative to reconcile the conservation of our forests and peatlands, to curb the climate crisis, with our commitment to fight poverty which is one of the major causes of deforestation in Africa. Indeed, before forbidding the Congolese living in Munkoto or Rapulu, to name only these two agglomerations, to practice slash and burn agriculture, in order to provide for the needs of their families, it is preferable to propose to them, beforehand, sustainable alternatives. To achieve this, I have launched an unequivocal call to action through win-win partnerships, particularly with industrialized countries, in order to mobilize adequate funding. In short, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is simply demanding fair and equitable compensation for its proven contribution to climate stabilization on the whole planet. The Democratic Republic of the Congo advocates through my voice the establishment of fairer prices of carbon credits, which should be around $100 instead of the current $5, which are disproportionate and ridiculous. I also spoke about the forests of the Congo Basin, of which the Democratic Republic of the Congo holds more than 60%, and which currently represents the first lung of the world. Our approach reminds an urgency that in order to preserve this natural asset it is necessary to invest in the implementation of structuring development projects for the benefit of the populations of the event, which have been disadvantaged for a long time. The mobilization all azimuths obtained around this emergency constitutes a crucial step in the right direction. The Glasgow conference was also an opportunity to highlight the fact that the Democratic Republic of the Congo is rich in strategic metals, in this case cobalt and lithium, which are essential to the energy transition. To this end I have instructed the government to accelerate the creation of a real value chain in this sector. The holding of the Sea Africa Business Forum is also part of this logic. It is a question of promoting the necessary investments to develop the immense energy mix of our country, notably hydroelectricity, solar energy and biomass. Solar energy and biomass. Honorable national deputies and senators, the interest generated for our country in Glasgow has led to important results. First of all, there is the signing of the political declaration on the second partnership DRC initiatives for the forests of Central Africa, COFI in acronym, for an amount of $500 million. Then there is the financial support of $1.5 billion of forests and peatlands of the Congo Basin, to be activated from 2022. In the same perspective, bilateral agreements and partnerships involving significant financing are being negotiated with states and various technical and financial partners in the resilient agriculture sector to fight deforestation, improve infrastructure, and ensure the development of indigenous peoples. For a better follow-up of this strategic file, I have instructed the government to give the benefit of urgency both to the formalization process and the implementation of these partnerships. I have also asked the government to ensure in a permanent way The positioning of the Democratic Republic of the Congo as a solution country to the climate crisis is maintained and consolidated, both in the follow-up of the recommendations of the COP26, as well as in the preparations for the COP27, to be held in Egypt next year. Honorable President of the National Assembly, Honorable President of the Senate, Honorable National Deputies and Senators, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my dear compatriots, should we remind ourselves that as soon as I took office, the Democratic Republic of the Congo to renew the contact with the International Monetary Fund, to be able to benefit from the necessary financing in terms of budgetary support and other, in order to support the various reforms envisaged. The resumption of cooperation with this institution will allow the country to strengthen the state's capacities and to support productive activities, in order to effectively relaunch economic growth and the progressive eradication of poverty. I have personally invested myself to give the necessary impulse to our diplomatic action of mobilization of external resources, which has allowed for a significant increase, despite the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. His contacts with development partners, notably the International Monetary Fund, led to the signing of an agreement allowing the Democratic Republic of the Congo to access, initially in 2020, the disbursement of $732 million under the Rapid Credit Facility, which has helped raise the level of our international reserves. Subsequently, the Democratic Republic of Congo entered into a 3-year agreement under the Expanded Credit Facility for an amount of $1.5 billion American dollars. This support, honorable national deputies and senators, have enabled our country to support its medium-term reform program, which aims in particular to maintain macroeconomic stability, increase fiscal maneuverability, and promoting sustainable economic growth. For fiscal year 2021 alone, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has received from its external multilateral partners commitments in the order of $4.5 billion. This is a record level never reached in the recent history of our country. In this same dynamic, I have traveled during this year successively to several countries of the Middle East, as well as in Asia Minor, with the firm will to allow the Congolese people to draw substantial dividends as soon as possible. I remain thus determined to do more for a happy outcome of all the deep reforms engaged, notably in the sectors of justice, education, and health, in order to better align our economy with the required performance standards. These various achievements are the tangible results of our intense diplomatic action. It goes without saying that this mobilization of external resources should continue next year. However, the financing of our country's development cannot be based solely on external resources. Also, and I instruct the government to recommit the country to other reforms, that will contribute significantly to improving revenue mobilization and to broaden the tax base. Already in 2021, the strict observance of budgetary discipline has enabled us, for the first time in our country's history, to reach and even exceed the budgetary targets. To reach and even exceed the budget allocations, thus leading to additional revenues of more than $2 billion. This performance should motivate us to continue to mobilize more internal revenue. Similarly, better governance of the extractive sector should allow the state to mobilize more resources to finance its priority projects, such as free primary education and universal health coverage. With regard to the year 2022, the growth of the gross domestic product, which was estimated at 5.6% in the budget bill submitted to Parliament, could be as high as 6.4%, according to the latest estimates of the International Monetary Fund. The main sources of this growth are due to the expected performance of the extractive industries, of transportation, of communication, as well as in the trade sector. Honorable members of Parliament and senators, I am aware that the social situation of our compatriots is not brilliant. Many households struggle to make ends meet and do not have access to basic social services, such as water, electricity, health care, transportation. I was saying that I am aware that the situation of our compatriots is not brilliant. Many households struggle to make ends meet and do not have access to basic social services such as water, electricity, health care and transportation. Certainly, during the year 2021, the government has taken a series of measures. But this is not enough. I therefore call on the government to accelerate the implementation of projects with rapid and visible impact. In fact, in the sectors of water and electricity, as well as health, to name but a few, most of the projects underway suffer from a lack of coordination and a weakness of piloting. Thus, for example, the Basenga power plants of 240 megawatts in Lualaba, and Mwandi Gusa of 32 megawatts in Upper Katanga are completely finished, but still not in operation. What about the three thermal groups of 800 kVA each, in the city of Kananga. The city of Kisangani remained 4 months in darkness, whereas this inconvenience could have been avoided with a better management of the power station.
En ce qui concerne
Silence, please. 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 With regard to the drinking water supply of the city of Kinshasa, the factories of Lemrambu of a capacity of 35,000 cubic meters per day, as well as Benza Ozone, with a capacity of 110,000 cubic meters per day, are experiencing delays that are detrimental to the population. These dysfunctions are unacceptable. I thus call upon all the stakeholders to settle without delay the problems and to deliver its works to improve the living conditions of the population. Honorable National Deputies and Senators, the issue of transportation and communication routes is a permanent challenge, whose impact on the national economy, and by ricochet on the living conditions of our compatriots, is undeniable. In terms of road infrastructure development, the strategic axes are the following: the rehabilitation of existing agricultural feeder roads, and the construction of new roads. The restoration of traffic by reopening the network of certain sections of dirt roads that have long been impassable, and the protection and maintenance of these roads by reinstating the system of manual cantonment. In addition to significantly improving urban and interurban traffic, the realization of these works should also allow a better connectivity between our different provinces. Its efforts to improve road infrastructures are already perceptible through the following projects. 1. There is the asphalting of 86 kilometers of the section of the Kolwezi-Bililo Road. 2. There is the asphalting of the section Bonamonda. 3. There is the asphalting of 140 kilometers between Kasumbaleza and Sakania. 4. There is the asphalting of the section Chikapa-Kamjal, and the rehabilitation of related rural infrastructure. 5. There is the asphalting of 56 kilometers of sections of the Lode-Chikapa Bridge. 6. There is construction of a new 160-meter-long bridge over the Kasai River in Chikapa. We will continue these efforts in 2022, and the following projects are expected to be launched: the construction of the deep water port of Banana, The asphalting of the Kisumano Road in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Mwenda in Zambia, 270 kilometers long. The asphalting of 30 kilometers of roads in the city of Bukavu, and 100 kilometers of the Bukavu-Goma section. Asphalting of 748 kilometers of the section, Beni, Kamanda, Nyania, Kisangani. The rehabilitation of 80 kilometers of the Kasindi-Beni section. The rehabilitation of 54 kilometers of the Beni-Butembo section. The rehabilitation of 89 kilometers of the Bunagana-Ruchuru-Goma section. The commissioning of the ferry for the crossing between Zongo and Bangui in the Central African Republic. And finally the asphalting of the section Kalamba-Mbuji, Kananga, Mbuji-Mayi. Finally, in the field of air transport, it is necessary. In the field of air transport, it is necessary to note the modernization of the control tower at Goma International Airport, the modernization of the international airports of Lubumbashi, of Kisangani, and Kolwezi, as well as the rehabilitation, reinforcement and extension of runways and parking lots in several other national airports are planned, notably that of Ndolo. Honorable national deputies and senators, we often say that Kinshasa is not the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and we are right. It is time to translate this statement into concrete actions, by adopting the approach which postulates that all development should start from the base, towards the top. This is the very meaning of the political system provided for in the 2006 Constitution, which provides for a unitary state, strongly decentralized. In this system, the territory is the geographical space that allows the junction between the central government and the provinces. The objective being to improve the living conditions of rural populations, and to accelerate the development of our country. This is why in 2022 we will launch an ambitious program of development of the country, from the bottom up, through its 145 territories. The beginnings of this vast program have already been laid out by the Prime Minister this year. The priorities retained in this program are the opening up of territories through the rehabilitation of nearly 9,000 kilometers and the maintenance of 30,000 kilometers of agricultural feeder roads. Improving access to electricity for rural communities, in particular through the construction of mini photovoltaic power plants. Improving access to drinking water through the construction of boreholes and the development of springs. The construction of rural economic infrastructure, including the equipping of 748 health centers, more than 1,200 schools, as well as the development of modern markets. And finally the restoration of the authority of the state, starting with the construction of administrative buildings in all 145 territories. Honorable President of the National Assembly, Honorable President of the Senate, Honorable National Deputies and Senators, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my dear compatriots. You have just followed the answers to the various salient points around several essential questions which touch the survival and the organization of our nation in what this one has of more deep and more illegitimate.
en ce que celle-ci a de plus profond et de plus légitime.
The course of the year 2021 with these various facts raised, and the challenges that they imply, far from weakening and dividing us,
Ont l'avantage
have the advantage to remind us that we have a collective destiny to assume
à assumer pour
for the development of the nation.
nos préoccupations demeurent
Our concerns remain fundamentally that of providing answers to the permanent problems linked to the daily life of our people,
de notre peuple
in order to consolidate the social contract which binds it to us its representatives called to defend its interests,
d'intérêt
and to achieve its happiness. The organization of the city such as we advocate it must ensure and guarantee the unity and the integrity of the national territory.
et l'intégrité du territoire national
To establish peace is to ensure the security of the people and their goods on all the extent of the Republic.
de la République.
For this reason, it is in a state that we want to be governed by law, characterized by a distributive justice, that we have focused the attention of the government on the problems encountered by our fellow citizens in the various sectors of life,
Concitoyens, dans les divers secteurs de la vie,
to find satisfactory answers to them. This long-term work forces us to revisit all the obsolete social structures,
désuètes
and to rethink how our country can rationally put new wine
tellement mettre
in new wineskins,
dans des outres neuves pour que
so that
le meilleur Congo
the best Congo of tomorrow, that we call with all our wishes, starts on the right foot in all the sectors of the national life.
de la vie nationale.
The communicating vessels to be established in these sectors will have for finality only the blooming of the family,
De la famille, l'intégration réelle
the real integration and cohesion of communities in the process of the expected development.
attendue. Sur ces points,
On this point it should be noted
que nos déplacements
that our trips outside the country have considerably improved the image of the Democratic Republic of the Congo,
démocratiques du Congo de la République
of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which has thus
ouverte au monde,
opened to the world like a lotus,
et nombreux sont ces pays
and many of these countries have decided to seal with us
de
solid win-win partnerships,
gagnant-gagnant. Ouverte sur l'extérieur,
open to the outside world and internally with all its interconnected provinces.
interconnectée,
The Democratic Republic of the Congo, which today has the wind in its sails, can take up several challenges for its reconstruction tomorrow.
construction. Nous devons
We must firmly believe in it and work on it urgently.
urgemment. Ainsi,
Thus its impoverished population, these disinherited princes of yesterday,
pourront bénéficier
will be able to benefit from all their wealth,
du sol
of the ground and the subsoil,
transformé
transformed for their betterment, while recognizing the vitality of our young democracy and our divergences.
et nos divergences. J'en appelle
I appeal to our collective conscience,
dans la mesure où
insofar as what unites us, that is to say the Democratic Republic of the Congo,
Congo
is more important than the egoism of each one and the dangerous,
je disais donc que ceux qui
I was saying therefore what unites us the Democratic Republic of the Congo is more important than the egoism of each one,
de chacun
and the dangerous tribalist cleavages that could divide us.
qui pourraient nous diviser. Renouvelons donc
Let us renew therefore,
chacun de nous
in each of us this sublime commitment, that our national anthem exalts, that of the people and our soil, and to ensure the greatness of our homeland. The history of the nation that we write together in concord and fraternity will be grateful to us. May God bless the Democratic Republic of the Congo abundantly. I thank you.